Hi guys, so this particular video is the beginning of the mythological creature video series that I'm going to be doing that has been made popular by Scalagrim and Shadversity, and along possibly with a couple of other channels, but they're the two channels that I particularly subscribe to and very much enjoy. If you haven't seen their videos guys, please do. They're very, very interesting. They have a wealth of knowledge on historical weaponry, so if HEMA and historical weaponry is your thing, then please check them out. They'll be a much better source of information for those kind of things than myself. I'm just here for the entertainment purposes, as best as I possibly can be, at least anyway. What this video is going to be about is the Minotaur. Okay, now the Minotaur typically is presented as a sort of half man, half bull creature, with the upper half, or certainly the head at the very least, being that of a bull, and more often than not they'll have hooved legs also. So they'll have the lower half of their lower half will be, I wouldn't say full bull, but more of a hybrid, sort of hybridization of both bull and man, and they sometimes will then have the body of a man, i.e. the upper torso of a man, but a very big man, a very big muscular man, kind of like Hathor Bjornsson in Game of Thrones. That we're talking big, strong men, okay, and then they always have the head of a bull presented within any form of mythology or modern sort of pop culture like films and stuff. Now, what I would say is the typical physical features of these creatures is that they are strong. I've already mentioned that. They are strong. Even the human parts of them are strong. And sometimes they even have human parts. Human parts are kind of like human-esque, but they're still covered in a sort of almost cowhide or fur. So there is variation in how they're presented, but typically every single part of them is strong and powerful, with the strength of what you'd expect a bull. And bulls are strong creatures. If you go here on YouTube and look at sort of you know, when bulls get loose and that, and they're charging down streets and that, they can pick up a car with their neck. You try that as a human, ain't happening, okay? Bulls are very, very powerful creatures, and they don't kill you necessarily by gorging you with the horns, although that is something they're very capable of doing. They kill you just by trampling over you and stepping on you, or hitting you very hard by running into you. Now, what I would say is one of the major attributes and that you would notice by going up against a Minotaur is not only their strength, but their weight also. They are going to be big, hefty creatures. They're going to be probably a good 7 foot tall. That's how often that they're represented, and they're not just going to be 7 foot tall. They're going to be 7 foot tall and built like a brick shit house, let's put it that way. And so they're going to weigh probably, I mean, if they were men at that height, they'd weigh a minimum of 30 stone, but I think because of all the additional bulk that they seem to have, being half bull, they're probably going to be at least 40 stone in body weight, at the very least. And that's hard to go up against in its own right. Just going up against a man of those proportions would be scary enough anyway, but the fact that it's got horns, the fact that it seems to be super aggressive, and the fact that it seems to a lot of the time have these cloven hooved feet that allow it to get to quite a speed and allow it to push at you very, very hard, makes this a very deadly animal, whether it's armed or creature, whether it's armed with a weapon or not. It doesn't matter if it's armed or unarmed. This is going to be one dangerous creature. Now, Shad, last time I watched his video, said about the horns being a sort of minor thing, that they wouldn't be used often. And okay, yes, maybe if he's running up against a formation of men armed with shields, armour, spears, at the very least swords, then the horns are going to be of a minor contribution to the Minotaur's arsenal. Because he has to get close and he has to partly expose himself, I suppose. He has to kind of stick his head out to kind of get to you with those horns. I would agree, but they're a nice accessory. They're a nice additional weapon to have. They're like a backup weapon. I like having a dagger on you. You might not use it at the beginning of the fight, but you know, once you've got the knight flat on his back, you can take the dagger and put it to his throat where the armor's not protecting him. That dagger is what's won you the game, and I think that's really where the horns really come in handy. If his weapon breaks, or if he's just up close and personal, so close and personal that weapons can't be swung properly, those horns, especially being on the sides of his head, have enough range to be dangerous, but not enough range to be useless. They literally have the perfect range to just go in bang. And if they, you know, one particular move that is used in, you know, real combat, you know, real sort of fights. If you go onto my real fighting talk, guys, you hear me talk about that all the time. Is headbutts. Headbutts are dangerous. They do a lot of damage, and even a very light Subscibe sort of woman weighing 8 stone can easily knock a man out of 17, 18 stone if she throws a headbutt correctly. And you imagine a headbutt from a minotaur with horns. Whether the horns hit you or not, it does not matter. They're going to have those really thick skulls. They're going to do some serious damage, and I imagine the damage that they'll do will be enough to crush a helmet, or at least give you concussion within the helmet, you know, and the force will go through the helmet and into your head to disable you, if not kill you. So that's one thing to consider. And what you've got to consider also is, because of their sheer size, I'm not talking necessarily height here, I'm just talking mainly their weight and their strength combined with it. These are creatures that really will rumble, really proper rumble up close and personal with no problems whatsoever. The other things to consider is obviously the bull aspect of them. Bulls do have thicker skin than humans, not to the point of like hippos and things like that, where, you know, they can be basically bulletproof to handguns and stuff. I hear that apparently hippos are bulletproof apart from, you know, high-powered rifles. At least they can't be seriously hurt. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not a zoologist, but it's what I've heard. You know, bulls aren't that tough, but they are a lot tougher than we are, and their hide is strong. And yes, okay, if you've got a good sharp razor sword, it's going through it, but it will be thicker, so you will have to plunge that sword a little bit further to get to any vital organs, and it will be tougher, so you're going to have to hit them harder to get through the hide anyway to start off with. And so the minotaur, in its own respect, has some form of weak armor. Just by being naked, it's almost always armoured to at least some degree. On top of that, its bones are going to be a lot thicker, a lot heavier, and a lot stronger than ours, because it will have been, if it's half bull, evolved to be able to, if you imagine minotaurs and their mating rituals, for example, when they're trying to fight other males off, you know, for a female minotaur. Now, do female minotaurs have udders? That's one question to potentially ask yourself. I'm not too sure the answer to that. But nonetheless, the typical mating ritual of a minotaur, you can probably imagine, would be males fighting one another, and they'd be pushing one another, and not necessarily trying to hurt one another on a permanent basis, but they will be pushing, and they will be gouging with their horns. They'll be doing the same thing that bulls do with one another. They'll be charging one another ultimately, and so they will have evolved a skeleton that can handle the forces that another minotaur can put onto them. So the forces that you as a man, even a big strong man, whatever, is going to be nothing compared to what a minotaur can put onto another minotaur. And so they're going to laugh at you because you're going to be weaker than, you know, a child in their eyes, or as weak as a child. You're not going to threaten them. What is going to threaten them about you is potentially your weaponry, okay, and the weapons that you choose to use on them. That's what makes you dangerous, not your physicality. Because, you know, with some creatures, for example, if you're fighting an elf, your physicality could be a major threat to them. But with a minotaur, no. They have the thumbs up on everything in regards to physicality. They're probably even fitter than you also. They probably can run quite far and quite fast. They're certainly faster than human beings on a sort of short sprint, or at least are equal. So outrunning them, probably not a good idea. And so having sort of gone just over the basics of their physicality, and looking at it at that perspective, me as a, if I was to go in and try and brawl one of these, I'd walk straight out the pub. If one was in a pub kicking off and wanted to have a fight with me, I'd let him do what he wants. I'd just walk out, because there's no chance on earth that I would be able to knock that minotaur out. Its skull will be too thick, its neck will be too muscular, and its body too muscular and too heavy in set for me to be able to do any damage with my fists or with my knees or my kicks or whatever. So unarmed combat against a minotaur, no chance. It would just rip you to pieces, literally rip you to pieces. Then if I found myself in a medieval sort of, or an adventurous setting where potentially I'm in its lair, which would typically be a labyrinth. Well, obviously the minotaur, if it is in a labyrinth, has a certain advantage because it knows the maze. They typically, minotaurs, and they don't get lost. Okay, they know their mazes, and so they'll be able to find their way around. They'll know how to sort of get around the back of you and all the rest of it if they're intelligent enough to do that. Now, remembering a maze and the sort of exact layout of a maze does indicate at least some degree of intellect. I know that they're often depicted as brutish, thick beasts that don't really have much intelligence, and I understand why they do that, because they've got to have some kind of, weakness, I suppose. But their traditional Greco-Roman depiction, and some recent depictions like Narnia and that, they're not thick. They have at least human intelligence, and as I say, to the ability to remember the layout of a labyrinth or a maze does indicate that they have at least some degree of intellect. And the other thing is they do always have weapons and sometimes armour, and they're not the same size as humans. So unless they have slaves or some kind of sub race that works in conjunction with them, for whatever trade of resources or services, whatever, they're going to be making their own weapons and their armour. There's no chance, they either got someone doing it for them or they're doing it themselves, and I would say that they're probably doing it themselves, okay? And so if they're able to forge steel, and even if it's crude weaponry and crude armour, if they're still able to do it, again, that shows a certain level of intellect, equaling our own, at least to some degree. So outsmarting them is not something I would say would be easy to do. And so if I found myself as a sort of D&D medieval adventurer going into a enclosed tunnel, underground sort of labyrinth like dungeon system, I would be crapping myself with the idea that there's a minotaur in there, because the tunnels funnel numbers, and the only real way that you're going to be able to deal with this minotaur is by surrounding him and stabbing him in the back, if I'm totally honest. And I don't mean just once, I mean again and again and again and again. You hit them with as much as you've got, and you put men in the front, you put them in the men in the back, and you try to box him in. That would be my way of trying to deal with him. You don't want this guy picking up speed. If he picks up speed and he runs at you, he's going straight through the entire line of you. It doesn't matter how many of you are, you're just going to be piling into each other, and you're just going to be crushed under his hooves, which is what a bull does to a human when it runs into us. Now, as I say, if you're going into a labyrinth-like system, a maze-like system, then, as I say, it's predominantly going to be underground tunnels and similar sort of structures to that. And so you can understand why maybe minotaurs live in labyrinths. It's because it allows them to defend themselves far better, because they can line up opponents that may outnumber them, because typically minotaurs are depicted as solitary creatures, but they can get you to go down there, but they can negate your numbers by simply getting you to funnel yourselves through the tunnel-like systems that exist. A bit like in 300 with the Spartans, okay? They get you to go through a pass and limit your numbers to some degree. So I would actually say that makes minotaurs quite clever indeed. They know their home defense. However, if you were fighting a minotaur one-on-one and you were in an environment that favours neither yourself nor them, how would you handle them, and how would they handle you? Well, the Minotaur has one, as I say, the biggest advantage is its size, its strength, its heft. He's going to want to try to close the distance, and he's going to want to close it quickly. If he closes it quickly and bangs into you, you're dead. Okay? Even if he just kind of clips you, you kind of just quickly dodge out the way. He will kill you very, very easily by bashing into you, or at least to take the wind out of you and stun you long enough for whatever weapon he's wielding to come crashing down whilst you're on the ground and cut you into two. So closing the distance with you is something he's definitely going to want to do. Keeping distance with him is something that you 100% want to do, because even if you are a very good swordsman, even if you are a very good unarmoured combatant, or whatever weapon you choose, even a polearm that gives you some reach and range, he's taller, so a sword to him, if he's wielding a sword or an axe, whatever, a two-handed axe to him. Imagine a minotaur with a Dane axe. You know, a Dane axe is 5.5 foot for someone like me, and I'm just over 6 foot. So if he's got that little sort of extra reach, he's probably got at least a 6 to 7 foot weapon himself, and that gives him a lot of reach. Okay, and that gives him enough reach to really sort of go toe to toe with any polearm that you might have, which would be the best kind of weapon to go up against a minotaur, in my opinion, a polearm. That is, when you start to get close, because you could just sort of dig it down, have the point of the weapon, the spear-like tip element of it, pointing towards the minotaur, and you try and get him to skew himself on it, or you try to skew him with it. And if that doesn't happen, then you hit him with the axe-like portion of the pole. I say polearm, I mean pole axes. Okay, and so you hit him like a halberd, and you hit him with the axe part, which has enough weight to hopefully get through his skin and his hide and at least do some serious damage. Now, the way that bulls are killed in bullfighting is they typically are bled to death initially. They'll have the clowns going around on horses and stuff, and they'll throw little spear tips into them, and the bleeding, the constant bleeding, and the running around chasing these non-entities tires the bull and makes it lose a lot of its rage, just simply because its adrenaline burns out. And once it's finished and it's over, the matador will come in and stick a sword through its neck, and ultimately that's how you, as a human, would have to handle a minotaur. Because you will have to tire it out, you will have to make it bleed, and you will have to, because any creature that loses enough blood will be, doesn't matter how big and strong it is, if it loses a lot of blood, it will become weak. It's just its body weight, which you still have to be wary of, because if it falls on you, it could still crush you, So, you need to make it bleed. A good way of doing that is bows, ranged weapons. Crossbows would be predominantly my recommendation, because they hit with a lot of power, and they're good for going through armour, unless you're a trained longbowman, in which case a longbow would definitely be better. But normal bows, yes, they would work, but I just think crossbows would be, they're easier to use. Well, are they easier to use? I mean, it's one of those, but the high-powered ones are easier to use than the high-powered bows, because you don't have to be particularly well-trained into using them. So if you had 3 or 4 guys come with you, all with crossbows, and you would pepper him with crossbows and get at least 2 or 3, 4 hits on him, then that's a good start. You then need him to tire out, so you then need to run. And when you run, you split up, okay? You split it up, you make him chase you, and if you're on your own, as I say, you hit him with your own crossbow to start off with, and you just try to strafe him. You try to get up on territory that he's going to struggle to climb up. He's got hooves, so he might not be able to climb trees, for example. You get above and you get away from him, and you get him to tire himself out by running around and chasing you. This is easier said than done, because, as I said, minotaurs, they're probably quicker than you. But because of their body weight, and because humans are very good endurance creatures, humans, as I say, we're one of the few creatures that can run a marathon, for example, and there's not many creatures out there that can run that far. So if you're particularly fit, then you could run him ragged, okay? But you're going to have to use your environment. You're going to have to make him chase you, and you're going to have obstacles in the way that stop him getting a full pace charge at you. Basically, if you make a mistake, you're dead. But if you get it right, you will tire him out. And as I say, if you keep peppering him with arrows or crossbow bolts, then he will bleed, and he will bleed, and he will bleed. Now, might not bleed to death. Bulls have a lot of blood in them. Minotaurs are not going to have quite as much blood in them, but they're going to have quite a bit. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to tire him out enough for then you to get into close combat without being too scared of his strength. And that's when you finish him with something sharp to the neck. Now, a sword is the most precise attack, but to do that, you kind of have to be above the animal. The way the matadors would do it is obviously the bull head is quite low down. It's not at head height at that point, and they would stick it in, and they know exactly where to go, and they train for that. Being that precise might not be possible for you to do in one strike, but what I would say is if you had a halberd then, or imagine running with a halberd and a crossbow, it's going to be hard going. Maybe a sword might be better, but a sword with a good reach, you go up and you stab him in the neck, and then run off, stab him in the neck. If it still doesn't kill him, eventually he's going to go down. This is the only real way that I can see a one-in-one combat with a Minotaur going well. For you, and it's a lot of if you outrun him, if you can get out of, keep away from him long enough for him to tire out, if you can hit him with ranged weapons to start making him bleed, if there's a lot of ifs basically, and so if you can get the final blow to the neck being accurate enough to kill him, there's a lot of ifs. So I think a one-on-one combat with a Minotaur is not going to go well for you. And the best people for it would probably be a matador, because treat them like bulls. The only problem is they're not just bulls, they are bulls with seemingly human intellect, and so they're not going to fall for the red rag, so to speak, in which case the Minotaur's screwed. Not the Minotaur, sorry, the Matador's screwed. Imagine it, he does that thinking it's going to chase through the red rag like a normal bull, and it just goes straight into him, and then picks him up and power slams him, and then pulls out a sword and guts him. You can imagine it. The tables are turned, so to speak. But that's how, in my opinion, on one-on-one, how you'd have to fight a Minotaur to stand a chance. So I'm not going into specific weaponry, I'm talking tactics here. However, if there's a group of you, as I say, and you've gone down into a labyrinth, again, it's the same tactics, exactly the same tactics as doing single combat. But if you're, again, in the open, it's exactly the same tactics. So that's how I would do it. Now, if I was the Minotaur, I know I'm bigger, I know I'm stronger than you. First thing I would do is I'd make sure that I forge some armour, some good armour that protects my weaker parts, which would be exactly the same parts as a human, apart from maybe the head. The head on a Minotaur would be particularly tough because the skull is going to be very thick, but still a helmet would be extra good on this, because then you've got the very thick skull, the very thick skin, you've got the horns, which are protective to some degree, and if you put a helmet over that can fit over all that. If you can make a helmet that fits over all that, then all the better. But I would definitely, as a Minotaur, want some very, very thick, heavy, metalled armour. Preferably plate, but obviously if it's chainmail, whatever. But what I would have is I would have the armour thicker than what a human would have. The reason, the thickness of armour that humans wear is relatively the same on all pieces of armour, because we can only carry so much weight before it starts to become cumbersome, before it tires us out. And the thickness of the armour is kind of basically linearly scales with protection. So the thicker the armour, the more protective it is. That's why tanks are bulletproof, because not necessarily because of the metal they use, it's just because the metal that is on them is so thick the bullet can't penetrate it. And so as a Minotaur, I would understand that I am so much stronger than a human that I could wear heavier, thicker armour than a human, and so I would get the thickest armour that I could wear without being slowed down too much. And as a result, I don't think a human weapon would actually be able to penetrate me, would actually be able to hurt me. And as long as I can't protect every part of me, obviously. Armour can never protect 100% parts of the body. Even the later sort of grade full plate armour couldn't protect you with 100% guarantee. But you know, if your fighting style evolved to protect those parts that are vulnerable, you're going to know which parts of you are vulnerable. You keep them away from the enemy and you keep them safe. And so as a minotaur, what I would do, my first priority is not what weapon I would pick, because I don't need a weapon to kill you. Okay, it would be what armor I would take. Now, would I take a shield? Shields, yeah, very good, especially because considering the tactics that I've just described for humans to use on them, a shield primarily is useful for anti-missile attacks, okay, so missile resistance, okay. So if you had a big ass shield, then you could cover, it didn't even have to be that big, a shield that's covering the mass majority of you, then you're very well protected against missile fire, and so they can't really bleed you, and the ones that do go through hopefully won't penetrate your armor anyway, in which case whoopee. Two-handed weapons, I don't know if they would be needed as a minotaur. Yes, you are big. Yes, you are strong. So taking a big, long, two-handed weapon compounds on that and makes you not just strong, but super strong. You know, when you hit, you're going to hit like a ton of bricks. And it would be particularly useful, two-handed weapons, like it's like some kind of like maul-like weapons. So two-handed sort of hammers. These would be useful against armoured opponents. If you're going up against humans in full plate heavy metal armour, you might not be able to, certainly because you're so much bigger, your weapons are going to be bigger, you might not be able to get a precise enough strike to go into the weak parts of a human armour. That would be one of the problems of being so big. You might not be able to be very precise with your own attacks, and so really the only way to do it is to hit them so hard that it doesn't matter whether they're wearing armour or not, you're going to concuss them, you're going to crush the armour, you're going to crush them at least within their own armour. And so a two-handed maul, in my opinion, is better than a two-handed axe, because you're not trying to cut through the armour, you're just trying to hit them with as heavy a weight as possible. But the problem with wielding a big two-handed weapon, heavy weapon like that as a minotaur, is that it depends how strong you are as a minotaur. You might not need it. You might not need that extra strength. You might be able to hit a human so hard with a one-handed weapon that it does enough damage anyway, and there's no point in overkill. And so the speed and the precision of a single-handed weapon over a two-handed weapon might actually be better for a minotaur in this case, especially as it allows you to use a shield to protect yourself. Regards to the kind of weapons that I would use single-handedly as a minotaur, you know what, I'd be tempted almost to say sort of like a flail. Like a morning star type kind of flail. Could you imagine that when they swing it up like that behind their shield? How are you going to get, if the human comes up to you, you bash them with your shield, create that distance, and then hit them with the flail. If they don't, you just close the distance, and whack them out with a real big heavy blow from the flail. That would be, to me, quite a dangerous combination. But I don't really think it really matters. Any single-handed weapon, I mean, you know, even a spear. I mean, a spear to a minotaur would be like a lance, you know, especially when he charges. It'd be quite a good way of getting into combat and just like literally impaling you. But then you'd have to have a backup weapon, because I don't think he'd be able to get the weapon out of you. He would literally impale you. But the weapon for the minotaur, as I say, I just don't think it's the most important aspect to consider. The most important aspect is the armor. If he armors up correctly, shield or not, it doesn't necessarily need a shield, but if he has really good armor, I don't think he has to worry, because you can't kill him, but he can kill you with his bare hands if he needs to. Even if you're in armor, he can still do enough damage by just picking you up and slamming you into the ground and then stomping you with his feet, with his hooves. That I don't think, to be honest, he needs a weapon, and so whatever weapon he picks would be useful. It's just an added bonus to him. Right, guys, I've said a little bit there on it. I think I've said enough. I might expand upon it at a later date, but I hope you enjoyed the beginning of this new series. If it doesn't do well, I might stop it, but if it does well, I'll definitely continue it, because I love my mythological creatures, and it's a great way of trying to perceive, you know, both sides of the story, so to speak. Thank you.